The TARDIS lurched, throwing Louisa against the console. Sparks flew from a shattered chronometer as the familiar wheezing groan became a distressed shriek. "Doctor, what was that?" Louisa shouted, scrambling to her feet. The doctor, eyes wide and fixed on the monitor, barely registered her. "Something's pulling us in. An artificial gravity field. Incredibly strong. And perception filters? That's clever. Disorienting." Before he could elaborate, the TARDIS slammed to a halt with a sickening thud. The lights flickered, then died, plunging them into darkness. "Well," Louisa said, her voice laced with nervous humor, "that's just great. Where are we?" The emergency lights flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows. The interior of the TARDIS seemed subtly wrong. The familiar walls felt harder, colder. The doctor was already at the door, scanning the surroundings with his sonic screwdriver. "We're indoors, somewhere enclosed, and the atmosphere is toxic. I'm reading high levels of volatile compounds. It's burning my eyes." He stumbled back, rubbing his face. Louisa coughed, a raw, painful sound. Her throat felt scratchy, and her vision swam. "What's happening?" she gasped. The door swung open with a metallic creak, revealing a long, dimly lit corridor. At the end stood a clockwork man. Its brass face was expressionless, its gears whirring softly. It held a thin, silver cane. "Welcome, students," the clockwork man said in a monotone voice, its words grinding like rusted cogs. "Class is in session. Please proceed to your allocated learning spaces." "Learning spaces," the doctor muttered, suspicion hardening his features. "This is getting stranger by the millisecond." He nudged Louisa forward. "We'll play along. For now." They stepped out into the corridor, the air immediately hitting them like a wall of static electricity. It stung their skin and blurred their vision. "This isn't breathable," Louisa wheezed, clutching her chest. "Just try to breathe shallowly," the doctor instructed, handing her a sonic screwdriver attachment. "It'll filter out some of the worst toxins. But quickly. We need to figure out what this is." The clockwork teacher gestured with its cane. "Follow me." They followed, the rhythmic clicking of the clockwork man's gears filling the oppressive silence. The corridor stretched on, lined with identical, unadorned doors. Each had a small, brass plaque above it, bearing only a single number. "What is this place?" Louisa whispered, her voice hoarse. "It feels wrong. Like a nightmare." "My thoughts exactly," the doctor replied grimly. "And I have a feeling it's about to get much, much worse." The clockwork teacher stopped at a door marked 23. It opened with a hiss, revealing a claustrophobic classroom filled with rows of desks. Seated at each desk were figures hunched over books. They were young, mostly teenagers, their faces pale and drawn. They didn't look up as the doctor and Louisa entered. "Take your seats," the clockwork teacher commanded, its voice unwavering. "The lesson will begin momentarily." The doctor and Louisa exchanged a worried glance. They took the two empty desks in the back row. As the clockwork teacher began to speak, its words a dry recitation of complex mathematical equations, the doctor scanned the room. The perception filters were strong. Everything seemed slightly out of focus, making it hard to think clearly. He noticed that the walls lacked any windows or exits. This was a prison, disguised as a school. He subtly used his sonic screwdriver to scan the students. Fear was a palpable presence in the room, clinging to them like a shroud. But there was something else. Something empty. One student, a girl with bright red hair and a defiant glint in her eyes, caught his attention. She was scribbling furiously in a notebook, but not with equations. Her lips moved silently. "Psst," the doctor hissed, leaning closer. "What is this place?" The girl flinched, then glanced nervously at the clockwork teacher, whose unblinking brass eyes seemed to see everything. She scribbled a quick note and passed it to the doctor. "Expulsion equals death. Study or die." The doctor's blood ran cold. He looked around the room with renewed urgency. The atmosphere, the clockwork teachers, the terrified students, the cryptic warning. It all added up to one terrifying conclusion. "This isn't education," he whispered to Louisa. "It's a death trap." Suddenly, a loud alarm blared through the room. The clockwork teacher's gears whirred faster, its brass face twisting into a grotesque approximation of anger. "Silence!" it shrieked. "Student 47 has failed to maintain the required concentration level. Expulsion is mandatory." One of the students, a skinny boy with glasses, started to tremble. The alarm intensified, and the floor beneath him began to glow with a menacing red light. The boy screamed as the floor opened, revealing a gaping hole. He plunged into the darkness below, his cries echoing for only a moment before abruptly ceasing. Louisa gasped, covering her mouth. The classroom fell silent, the students staring blankly ahead. "That's it," the doctor said, his voice hard. "We're getting out of here." The doctor jumped to his feet. "Time for a pop quiz," he announced, trying to inject some levity into the situation. Question 1. How do we escape this diabolical institution? The clockwork teacher turned, its gears grinding menacingly. "You will remain seated." The doctor ignored it, pulling Louisa up. "We're not students. We're examiners. And we've just found some serious flaws in your curriculum." He fired his sonic screwdriver at the clockwork teacher, overloading its circuits. The machine sputtered, its gears grinding to a halt. Smoke billowed from its brass face. "Run!" the doctor shouted. They bolted for the door, ignoring the terrified shrieks of the students. As they burst into the corridor, the alarm intensified. Other clockwork teachers, alerted by the commotion, began to converge on their location. "We need to find the TARDIS," Louisa yelled, her eyes stinging from the toxic atmosphere. "Easier said than done," the doctor replied, glancing around frantically. The perception filters were getting stronger. The corridor seemed to shift and twist, making it impossible to get his bearings. They ran blindly, dodging clockwork teachers and trying to avoid the glowing red floor panels that signaled instant expulsion. The air grew thicker, more corrosive. Louisa coughed violently, her vision blurring. "I can't see," she choked. "The atmosphere, it's too much." The doctor's own vision was failing. He stumbled, barely catching himself. We need help," he gasped, his voice hoarse. He remembered the red-haired girl in the classroom, the one who had warned them. "Louisa, listen carefully. We need to find room 23 again. The girl with the red hair, she can help us." But navigating the labyrinthine corridors, blind and disoriented, seemed an impossible task. They were lost, adrift in a sea of shifting perceptions and deadly clockwork adversaries. Suddenly, they heard a faint voice whispering, "This way. Hurry!" It was the red-haired girl. She was leading them through the corridors, her small hand gripping the doctor's arm. "I can see a little better than the others," she explained. "I've adapted. But we have to be quick. They are coming." She guided them through a maze of corridors, avoiding the clockwork teachers and the deadly traps. The doctor and Louisa stumbled blindly, their trust placed entirely in this young girl. "What's your name?" the doctor asked, his voice strained. "Ilara," she replied. "And I know what's really happening here." Ilara led them to a hidden alcove, a small, dark space behind a loose panel in the wall. "We're safe here, for now," she said, panting. The doctor and Louisa leaned against the wall, struggling to catch their breath. Their eyes burned, their lungs ached. "What do you know about this place?" the doctor asked, his voice barely a whisper. Ilara took a deep breath. "This is a farm. We're being bred, like cattle." "Bred for what?" Louisa asked, her voice trembling. "For their hunger," Ilara replied, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "The lonely assassins." The doctor felt a chill run down his spine. The lonely assassins, creatures that fed on fragmented timelines, waited in shadows for a moment of blindness in which to strike. They were creatures of pure terror, existing outside the normal flow of time. "They need us to be disoriented, confused, vulnerable," Ilara explained. "The perception filters, the toxic atmosphere, it's all designed to weaken our minds, to make us easier prey." "And the clockwork teachers?" the doctor asked. "They are their puppets," Ilara said. "They control them, guiding us towards our expiration date." The pieces were falling into place. The sinister curriculum, the deadly expulsion, the constant fear. It was all a carefully orchestrated feeding ground for the lonely assassins. "They are waiting for us to be completely blind," Ilara said, her voice filled with dread. "When we can't see them, when we can't perceive them, that's when they strike." The doctor realized the horrifying truth. The artificial blindness wasn't just a side effect of the environment. It was the key to the entire operation. "We need to be able to see them," he said. "We need to find a way to bypass the perception filters." He pulled out his sonic screwdriver, his fingers fumbling with the controls. He needed to recalibrate it, to adapt it to the unique properties of the perception field. "I think I can do it," he muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. but I need a clean energy source. Something powerful. Ilara hesitated. There's a reactor core on the lower levels, she said. It powers the entire facility, but it's heavily guarded. We don't have a choice, the doctor said. We need that power. We need to see. Stealth became their only weapon. Ilara, guiding them through the labyrinthine corridors, led them towards the lower levels. They moved like shadows, hugging the walls, avoiding the patrolling clockwork teachers. The atmosphere grew even more oppressive, the air thick with the stench of decay. The doctor and Louisa struggled to breathe, their vision constantly blurring. As they descended deeper, they began to see signs of the lonely assassins. Flickering shadows danced at the periphery of their vision. Whispers seemed to echo from the walls. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. Finally, they reached the reactor core. It was a massive, cylindrical chamber, bathed in an eerie green glow. Guarding the entrance were 4 clockwork teachers, their brass faces impassive, their silver canes held at the ready. This is it, Ilara whispered. We need to get past them. The doctor took a deep breath. Distraction time, he said. He hurled a small, sonic grenade towards the guards. The device emitted a high-pitched shriek that overloaded their auditory sensors. The clockwork teachers faltered, their gears grinding erratically. Now the doctor shouted. They charged forward, Ilara leading the way. She knew the layout of the facility, the blind spots in the clockwork teachers' programming. She weaved around them, guiding the doctor and Louisa through the chaotic melee. One of the clockwork teachers lunged at Louisa, its silver cane raised to strike. The doctor intercepted, slamming his sonic screwdriver into its chest. The machine shuddered, its gears grinding to a halt. They reached the reactor core, its door sealed and heavily guarded. The doctor quickly analyzed the locking mechanism with his sonic screwdriver. It's a temporal lock, he said, designed to prevent tampering with the timeline. Clever. He worked feverishly, bypassing the security protocols. Time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity. The alarm blared incessantly, the clockwork teachers closing in. Finally, with a click, the door swung open. The doctor and Louisa rushed inside. Ilara closed behind. The reactor core was a dizzying array of pipes, wires, and glowing crystals. The air crackled with energy, making their hair stand on end. Where's the power tap? The doctor shouted, his voice barely audible over the hum of the reactor. Ilara pointed to a small panel on the side of the reactor. There. But it's protected by a force field. The doctor immediately began to work on disabling the force field. He adjusted his sonic screwdriver, fine-tuning its settings. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died. The chamber was plunged into darkness. A collective gasp filled the air. Ilara screamed. They are here, she cried. The lonely assassins. They know we're blind. The doctor felt a cold hand brush against his arm. He spun around, but saw nothing. He heard a faint whisper, a promise of oblivion. He knew they were in their element, unseen, unheard, ready to strike. Panic threatened to overwhelm the doctor. He knew that any sign of fear, any loss of focus, would be an invitation for the lonely assassins. He had to remain calm, to think clearly. He remembered Elara's words. They need us to be disoriented, confused, vulnerable. He closed his eyes, focusing on his inner strength. He would not let them win. He recalibrated his sonic screwdriver, channeling the raw energy of the reactor core. He knew it was a desperate gamble, but it was their only chance. Hold on, he shouted. This might sting. He activated the sonic screwdriver, unleashing a concentrated burst of energy. The reactor core hummed, its power surging. Suddenly, the perception filters shattered. The world snapped back into focus. The doctor gasped. The chamber was filled with grotesque figures, their bodies twisted and contorted, their eyes burning with malevolent intelligence. They were the lonely assassins, and they were swarming towards them. Ilara, Louisa, the doctor shouted. Look at them. Don't blink. Don't even think about closing your eyes. Ilara and Louisa blinked rapidly, their eyes watering. The sight of the lonely assassins was horrifying, but they forced themselves to look, to perceive. The lonely assassins recoiled, hissing and spitting. They were vulnerable now, exposed to the light. The doctor focused the sonic screwdriver on the power tap, overloading the force field generator. With a final surge of energy, the force field shattered. He quickly connected the sonic screwdriver to the power tap, drawing a massive amount of energy. The device began to glow with an intense light. We're getting out of here, the doctor shouted. Everyone, grab on. He activated the sonic screwdriver, using its power to overload the reactor core. The chamber began to tremble, the air crackling with energy. The lonely assassins shrieked, their forms dissolving into swirling shadows. They were being forced back into the void, their feeding ground destroyed. The doctor, Louisa, and Alara clung to each other as the reactor core exploded. The facility shook violently, the lights flickering and dying once more. They stumbled out of the reactor core, coughing and spluttering. The facility was collapsing around them, the corridors filled with smoke and debris. The clockwork teachers were in disarray, their programming disrupted by the explosion. They stumbled aimlessly, their gears grinding to a halt. "We need to get to the TARDIS," the doctor shouted. Ilara led them through the chaos, navigating the collapsing corridors with surprising speed. They dodged falling debris and avoided the malfunctioning clockwork teachers. Finally, they reached the TARDIS. The blue box stood amidst the wreckage, a beacon of hope in the darkness. The doctor unlocked the door, ushering Louisa and Alara inside. He quickly input the coordinates, setting the TARDIS for a safe distance. The TARDIS lurched, escaping the dying facility just seconds before it imploded. They were safe, for now. As the TARDIS materialized in the vastness of space, the doctor turned to Alara. "What will you do now?" he asked. Ilara looked back at the fading glow of the destroyed facility. "I'll find the other students," she said. "The ones who survived. We'll build something new, something better." The doctor smiled. "I have a feeling you will." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver device. "Take this," he said. "It's a personal perception filter. It'll protect you from any future attempts to manipulate your senses." Ilara took the device, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Doctor," she said, "for everything." The doctor looked at Louisa, then back at Ilara. "Sometimes," he said, "the best lessons are learned outside the classroom." He opened the TARDIS door. "Farewell, Ilara, and good luck." Ilara stepped out into the vastness of space, ready to face the future. The doctor watched her go, a sense of hope filling his heart. He closed the TARDIS door and turned to Louisa. "Where to next?" she asked, her voice filled with excitement. The doctor grinned. "Anywhere we want. The universe is our classroom, Louisa, and the lesson never ends."